All right, so we have 3 goals for all of you for today, and the agenda was created with these goals. First is for you to learn more about ARPA-H, how it came about, and what is its mission. Second is for you to learn more about THEA and each other, so you can form comprehensive teams of performers. And then third is for you to understand the process by which ARPA-H will contract with your teams of performers. So those 3 goals will be the first 3 presentations. Then, after a break, we will discuss commercialization of the discoveries from THEA, followed by plenty of time for Q&A. After lunch, we will have the poster session here in this room to allow you to better appreciate each other. So let's get started. As I introduce our first speaker, I tell all newcomers to vision science that the good and bad news is that vision science community is small. Most everyone is 2 or at most 3 degrees of separation from anybody else. So with those connections, our first speaker is Dr. Amy Jenkins. Amy is the director of the Health Science Futures Office at ARPA-H. She has broad experience in science and medicine through her PhD work, in industry, as a program manager at DARPA, and now as a leader at ARPA-H. Amy has embraced whole eye transplantation for the first time that I proposed it a year ago. She is knowledgeable and supportive and has championed this project through the ARPA-H leadership. Thus, with all your approval, I nominate Amy to our vision science community as a bona fide eye guide. Please welcome Amy Jenkins.
Thank you, Cal. Thank you, everybody, for bearing with us. Really excited to be here today and welcome you to the ARPA-H family. Explain a little bit more about the model. Some folks in the audience may have known nothing about ARPA-H. Some folks in the audience may know something about DARPA, which is similar to ARPA-H, and some folks in the audience, I know for certain, know a lot about DARPA. So I'm going to jump into this model a little bit, and then I'm going to go really quick so we make up some time. So, as I've mentioned, ARPA-H is modeled after DARPA. And for those of you who don't know, DARPA stands for the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. This was an agency that was stood up in 1958 by President Eisenhower at the time, and it was in response to Sputnik. So there was a satellite put up over our heads. People panicked and said, what is this thing that's looking down on us? And the US government said, we will never be surprised again. We are going to stand up an agency that is going to create surprise. We're going to fund the craziest science, and we're going to ensure that this never happens to us again. We're going to be the surprise makers in the world. And that was the model that DARPA was stood up for national security. That led to many innovations. It led to stealth, largely credited with inventing the at least very early underpinnings of the internet. It led to self-driving cars, and it also led to some of the advances that gave us mRNA vaccines during COVID-19. And so with that, in that model, ARPA-H was stood up. But ARPA-H has one mission. It is not a national security mission. It's a health mission. So we are here to accelerate better health outcomes for everyone. So President Biden, in March of 2022, said, I want to stand up an agency like DARPA, but I want it to be able to focus on health. Imagine what we could do if we take that crazy, transformative, wild science agency and we apply it 100% focus on health. And that's what ARPA-H is. So we are modeled after the business practices of DARPA, and you'll hear that invoked a lot. A lot of people, if you are familiar with ARPA-H and its inception and how we stood it up, a lot of people ask the question, well, where does ARPA-H sit in the big ecosystem that is the government? And so this is why I like to present this slide, because there's a lot of confusion about this. So we are administratively linked to the NIH. We are not an NIH IC. We are not an NIH agency. And so we are an independent agency that is administratively linked to NIH, but we are a separate division within the Department of Health and Human Services. Our agency director, Dr. Renee Wegersen, reports directly to Secretary Becerra within Health and Human Services. So she does not report to the NIH director. I say all this to say that our model is quite a bit different. So many of you in the room are likely very familiar with the NIH model, with study sections, with R01s. We don't do any of that. We'll talk through a little bit of our model, but we don't have study sections. We don't fund science by consensus. And the reason that we don't is because there's an absolute place for science by consensus and for study sections like at the NIH. However, here we want to do things that are risky and crazy. And if you put every one of you in the room and you ask you all to come to consensus on something that's crazy science, nobody will agree. We'll never get there. And what we'll do is we'll get to the point where it's not risky anymore. And we don't want to do that. We want to fund things that are crazy, maybe impossible, but that's the point of our agency. So with that, we have 4 mission offices at ARPA-H. I'm not going to talk through all 4 of them, other than to say there's the Health Science Futures Office. That is the office that I am the director of, and that Cal is a program manager in, and that is the office in which THEA is a program. There are 3 other offices, our Scalable Solutions, Proactive Health, and Resilient Systems Office, and they have the same exact structure as we have. So a director and program managers that are launching programs inside those offices as well. So what does our ecosystem look like? We work very closely with the NIH. We are, like I said, not one of the divisions within the NIH, but we partner with them and work very closely with them. And of course, for THEA, very closely with the National Eye Institute. We work with our federal partners at the Center for Medicaid Services and the FDA. And we work with private sector. But where do we fund? You're all here to know who we fund. Who can be funded by ARPA-H? We call our grantees performers. That's because we don't issue grants. You're going to hear a little bit about that later. But I get this question all the time. Like, I'm a small company. Can I apply to a program? Yes. I'm a large company. I'm a pharmaceutical company. Can I apply? Yes. I'm a small lab. I'm a big lab. All of the above. So we fund academia, industry, NGOs. We work with other government partners. All of the above. And the reason we do this is because the things we're asking you all to do are crazy and they're hard, and we need everybody to come together to the table to try to solve these problems. I'm going to talk just very briefly about the Health Science Futures Office within ARPA-H. So I've told you about ARPA-H and how we fund revolutionary science, how we fund high-risk science. What do we do specifically within Health Science Futures, one of the divisions within the agency? And the reason we broke these offices down the way we did is that this is focused on really the types of technology that we may fund. And so when Health Science Futures within this office, this is the probably craziest of the offices at ARPA-H. I like to say that, where ARPA-H is ARPA office. And so here is where we are really looking to expand what's technically possible. We're looking to develop tools, technologies, platforms that will really revolutionize healthcare of the future. And many of the things that we invest in and some of the technologies that we invest in, they may not see, they may not have that healthcare impact for a decade. But we feel that making these pivotal investments now will entirely revolutionize the future. We have a lot of different methods that we use to fund groups, but one of the things, and I said this briefly before, and it's the reason you're all here today and listening online, it's the reason we're going to have those poster sessions, and I love that we had our impromptu introduction to each other. We are funding very hard things. We're asking you to do very hard things. It is very unlikely, and I would say highly unlikely in the case of THEA, that any one group out there can do this with one PI, with one lab, with one company. It's very hard. And so we're looking for you to find each other, help each other. You should have complementary technologies that will be applied to solve this problem. That's the point of a Proposers Day. You're going to hear a little bit, you hear from me about ARPA-H, you're going to hear from Cal about the program, but really the real crux of the reason you're here is to talk to each other. Find each other and figure out how to solve this big problem that we're asking you to come together for. And so with that, I just want to briefly talk about a couple of our other programs, give this a little bit of a flavor of what we do in this office. We have 3 launched programs before THEA. Nitro, Psi, and Apex. Nitro is an osteoarthritis program. Psi is a surgery program, and Apex is a vaccine program. So we run the gamut. We have lots of different types of technologies that we invest in this office, and I'm so excited. And thank you, Cal, for introducing me to the world of eye transplantation. Briefly, I just want to talk a little bit about our model. I mentioned that we don't do study sections. It is a very different model, and our program managers come here. We come here as government employees, but we don't stay. I don't stay. Tyler, that you heard from earlier, doesn't stay, and Cal doesn't stay. We're not allowed to stay at this agency forever. We want new, crazy ideas constantly coming into the agency, and because of that, program managers have a very limited lifetime. They are allowed, they're here on a 3-year term, renewable for up to an additional 3 years, so a maximum of 6 years, and then they have to go, I have to go, our director has to go, everybody leaves. So what the agency looks like today, it will not look this way in 6 years. And that is because if you have the same people thinking of the same ideas, those ideas are they're just, nobody's gonna have, new ideas for the entire rest of their life. We really want to ensure that we bring revolutionary ideas into this agency. So program managers will come for anywhere between 3 and 6 years. They'll start programs while they're here. And those programs run anywhere from 2 to 4, and the slide says 2 to 4, right? It's 3 to 5, 3 to 5 years, and then they go. And so that just keeps, entirely new ideas always coming into our agency. And so how does this work? Who makes the decision of what we're going to fund? Our program managers do. So we're a bottom-up agency. I don't make the decision. Our director does not make the decision on what kinds of programs to go after. We bring in program managers that are very passionate about a space. Cal is very passionate about whole eye transplantation. We said, yes, let's take a shot on this. And so the program managers come in with the idea. They say, this is a challenge in the healthcare field that I want to try to solve. They develop a program. And so where you are right now is you're in that third box, launching the program. So the program manager goes out, holds proposers days, folks propose to the solicitation, the call for proposals, and then out of that, groups will be funded, and those are our performers. So that's our general model, and none of that is done through a study section. So this is done through a valid government review, but it's not by consensus. One thing I do want to say is that what Cal is trying to do here, what you all are trying to do is very hard. And so you may not always succeed, but what we want is sometimes we do succeed. We have teams that are going to transplant a whole eye and it is going to work perfect. Sometimes some of the approaches that folks take may not work, and we recognize that, but there's going to be wins along the way that are going to teach us things about optic nerve regeneration or nerve regeneration in general, about organ ensuring that organs for transplantation are maintained as part of the first technical area of the program. So there will be successful failures, if you will. And we really want to push as hard as possible to ensure those successful failures. And then if we manage to get to the very end and are successful, then that's the biggest prize. You're going to hear a little bit later, very briefly, about what happens if you are successful. We don't just, we do walk away. ARPA-H doesn't fund things in perpetuity. There's no renewal of the grant, but we ensure we have a whole office that's focused on ensuring that when we're done here, when Health Science Futures is done, that there's a life beyond the THEA program. And so with that, we like to put this up. This is a installation at the Renwick Gallery in DC, and it kind of summarizes ARPA-H quite nicely. And I want to welcome you to the ARPA-H family. You're part of that now that you've attended an ARPA-H Proposers Day. Think big, think bold, think crazy, say things that you think your colleagues are going to say, person's crazy. I don't think we could do that. That's what we want. That's what we're looking for here in this room. And really looking forward to seeing some posters later, and looking forward to all the solutions that you all can bring to THEA. So with that, we're going to move on to the next presentation. So thank you all.
That's great. So thank you, Amy, for that. I hope now you have a better feeling for why we're all here and why we have so much confidence in all of you to make this happen. So now let's talk about THEA. And I put this picture up because everyone in this room understands that the eye is nothing more than the anterior extension of the brain. And so that the key point that we need to make here is how we are going to connect eyes back to the brain is applicable not just for vision, but is potentially applicable for so many other applications within the body. So as doctors, we transplant hearts, we transplant lungs, we transplant livers, we transplant kidneys, we transplant skin, we transfuse blood. So why don't we transplant eyes? And the answer is because it's really, really hard. because we would need not only to reattach the optic nerve such that it transmit, but we'd also need to reattach all the cranial nerves 3, 4, 5, 6, reattach the blood vessels, reattach the muscles. But if we could, we might be able to restore vision. Why today? Why do I think today is the time that we could do this? Because as a result of the work that came out of the National Eye Institute's audacious goals in regenerative medicine, of knowledge that we got from the DARPA program in bridging the gap, also what we learned through the whole Argus 2 and the artificial retina project, is that I think that today is the time that we have the fundamental science, the fundamental knowledge that we now can translate into making whole eyes transplantation reality. So the THEA program is to restore vision for the blind through whole eye transplantation by developing new technologies to regrow nerves from the eye to the brain. As the eye is the extension of the brain, THEA's success could impact many more conditions than blindness. And that's why we're all here today. Most people realize this, but when I think about the various conditions in the eye, we usually divide them in those that affect the front of the eye, those that affect the back of the eye, realization that trauma can affect both front of the eye and back of the eye. And when we think about the back of the eye conditions over the years, we have therapies that certainly can slow down, whether it's diabetic retinopathy, glaucoma, macular degeneration, or certain genetic eye diseases, but we don't have a way to restore vision to those who have already lost it. When we talk about front of the eye conditions, the prognosis is better. That we know that there are surgeries that can restore vision, certainly for people who have cataracts, people who have corneal diseases. And so how can we use what we already know, the infrastructure that has been so successful for front of the eye, in order to help us with whole eye transplantation? Help me, because I seem to have the next slide skips. Can somebody sway to help me here? So when I go to the okay, great. Okay, great. Just look at it. All right. So every year, 70,000 people donate their eyes for transplantation. And when I think about that process, so we start out harvesting eyes from cadavers. The eyes are then maintained for a period of time, at least for a week. The corneas are transported to the location where the transplant will occur. The surgery is done by a single doctor, usually an ophthalmologist who specializes in corneal transplants. Fortunately, corneas tend to be immunoprivileged, so rejections are few, and the recovery of vision occurs relatively quickly in the period of weeks to months. Now, that's when someone's vision loss is from cornea only. But what do we see when we think about when someone has total vision loss, and where therapeutics and regenerative medicine have yet to show an ability to restore vision? That's where I see the opportunity here for THEA. But it'll be a little different. Because first of all, as we all know, the retinas don't survive more than minutes after someone dies. And so no longer are we looking at taking eyes from cadavers. We're looking at taking eyes from organ donors. We need a way in order to preserve the viability of the retina and the optic nerve from the time that it's harvested from this donor until the time that it can go for transplantation. Now, maybe in our early investigations, the donor and the recipient may be close by, but we want a situation in which we're able to maintain these donor corneas viable and to be able to transport them to where the surgery will be. For sure, what makes this super hard is the need to be able to reattach the optic nerve such that the donor eye is able to transmit a signal to the recipient's brain that the recipient can interpret as vision. The surgery is a lot more complicated. The surgery is done primarily by plastic surgeons, ENT, neurosurgeons. Ophthalmologists are probably a minor part of the surgical team. And of course, as soon as we cut the optic nerve, the immunoprivilege of the eye is lost. And so we need to have our strategies of how are we going to minimize inflammation? How are we going to minimize the chance of rejection of these eyes? And the other thing is that the restoration of vision is not going to be days to weeks. It's going to be months to years. And how are we going to be able to know with certainty what's happening in the healing? How are we going to be able to visualize that optic nerve such that we know that the nerve is regenerating, is reconnecting, and how are we going to know that this new transplanted eye is capable of sending a signal that is going to be received by the brain during that period of time between when the surgery occurs and when vision has been restored. So these three challenges or hurdles, these three what we call hurdles, are what we have now turned into what we call our three technical areas. And I'm going to ask Cynthia to come and talk about them.
Great, thank you for the introduction, Cal. So yes, we've separated these into three therapeutic areas, and the first, as Cal mentioned, would be tissue harvest and preservation. And so this therapeutic area is solely is exclusive to that. Before I get started, I do want to mention that everything that I'm going to be talking about is included in the ISO, which is available online, and so please refer to the ISO for more specifics. That's going to be your guide. All right. So as Cal mentioned, the limitation for tissue harvest and preservation is the limited viability of the eye outside the body, and requirements of continual oxygenation and loss of nutrients and the sensitivity. So what we want to do, our goal here, is to have you, our performers, to deliver a technology that is capable of preserving the eye and optic nerve viability for a minimum of 48 hours with human eyes, and that's within 5% of freshly harvested eyes as a comparator, with standardization and reproducibility of technology. We are not going to tell you exactly how to do this. Potential paths forward these are some examples, but again, we are not limited to these specific examples. We're interested in hearing what you have to say. So that could be, we want to see protocols from you. You could propose metabolic chambers. You could propose cold storage, cocktails of neuroprotective elements, whatever you think is going to be the best way to do this. I apologize for the very small font, but again, all of this is in the ISO and you can read it. You can read it there. But essentially, if we were to break this 6-year program up into 24-month increments, phase 1 should be focused on animal eyes and trying to preserve the eye and the optic nerve outside or ex vivo for at least 24 hours. That would be one metric. This is how we're going to define success. We also want to see at least one protocol for harvesting the globe with or without the surrounding tissues. We also want you to verify healthy ocular anatomy over time in these animal eyes. And so this could be histology, IHC, gene expression, however you want to, we want the ultrastructure of the retina, what what the cornea looks like, anything that you think would demonstrate that the eye that's been removed 24 hours ago is still equally viable to the eye that was just freshly harvested. So that's in phase 1. And also we want to verify healthy retinal function, obviously. Phase 2, we're going to switch from animal eyes to human eyes. And we're going to extend that time frame from 24 hours to 48 hours. And same idea, we want to compare the ocular anatomy of the eye that's been removed 48 hours ago to the eye that was freshly harvested. And we want to make sure that these two things are comparative, are comparable, I should say. And so again, we could do this through any non-invasive methods, OCT, MRI, dark, adaptive optics, whatever you come up with, we're open to hearing your proposals. And we want to meet and exceed the requirements of that previous phase. So each phase we're going to build and make it a little bit more advanced as we go along. And so now we want to see healthy anatomy within about 10% of what that freshly harvested eye would be in terms of retinal function, ERG, pattern ERG, et cetera. By phase 3, we're going to take that 10%, that 10% buffer, we're going to reduce it to 5% in human eyes. So we want to see you meet and exceed the metrics of TA1, phase 1, and phase 2 within human eyes and within 5% of baseline metrics. Also, and this is an important one, we do want to make sure that the donor harvest surgery minimizes facial disfiguration. That's for aesthetic funeral purposes for the family. TA2, this is the fun one, optic nerve reattachment and repair. So again, the limitation, as Cal mentioned, and I think as many in this room are very, very well aware, that we must reconnect the donor optic nerve to the recipient's optic nerve stump. And that optic nerve must be able to transmit signals to the appropriate regions in the brain. And we have to be able to quantify restoration of vision in animal models. So the goal here is for the proposers to develop a technology. And again, we're not going to dictate what it is. These are some suggestions, a nerve wrap, bioscaffolds, neurotrophic vector stem cells, et cetera, to enhance or accelerate optic nerve repair in vivo in humans. It's the overarching goal. And again, we have some potential paths forward that we're not limiting you to just those. So you want to hear what you have to say. Let's see if this video will work. Here we go. And this is why we had this animation created, because we wanted to emphasize to everyone at ARPA-H how this is an ARPA hard problem. And these are just some examples of the technologies that I mentioned. So nerve wraps to marry the two stumps together, electrical stimulation to promote growth from the donor eye to the recipient, stem cells, a cocktail of neuroprotective factors. But we like to say, as Cal mentioned, we like to keep things ARPA hard, and this part is definitely ARPA hard. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so here are the metrics for TA2. Again, small font, please look at the ISO. If we're going to separate it out into 3 phases, phase 1 being the proof of concept, phase 2, I like to think of as really the translational phase, so the preclinical studies and finally moving on to human surgery. So phase 1 and proof of concept, this is where the small animal models come in. Whichever animal model you prefer, optic nerve crush, cut, whatever you propose. And we want to see at least one technology to enhance or accelerate optic nerve repair in small animal models, at least 30. We also want you to demonstrate RGC neuroprotection and or optic nerve regeneration in a small animal model. Again, within 10% RGC survival and or axonal viability compared to baseline. Again, you can use IHC, you can quantify axons, retrograde tracers, however you see fit. We want you to verify retinal function and or visual acuity, ERG, optokinetics, et cetera, and produce at least one prototype for a high imaging technology that we could use to quantify visual function in animals and small animals. Phase 2, we move on from small animals to large animals. And now what we're going to do is we're asking you to demonstrate standardization and reproducibility of that technology that was established in small animals. Now we want to see it in large animals. We also want you to demonstrate neuroprotection and optic nerve regeneration in large animals by either any of these two methods or two of any of these methods, be it MEMRI, DARC, tracers, etc. Verify transmission of retinal signals to the brain and within 10% of baseline, again, visual evoked potentials, optokinetics, and then produce, again, a prototype for new imaging technologies. Now we went, again, from small animals, now we're in large animals. We want to see the prototype in large. And then by phase 3, we're in humans. Meet and exceed the previous 2 phases. In humans, demonstrate subject's visual ability by at least 2 methods, again, within 10% of baseline, light perception, shape recognition, contrast sensitivity, etc. And use that optimized technology to visualize optic nerve repair and reattachment in humans. And finally, TA3, this is the surgery, post-op care and assessment. Again, the limitation is we want to reestablish all the supporting tissues. And so it is important that you establish what would happen if it's just the globe that needs to be transplanted versus also any of the surrounding tissue, extraocular eye muscles, things like that. We also need to minimize inflammation, and we want to be able to monitor the optic nerve structural and cellular healing at the transplantation site, because I think you guys know better than, even better than I do, that it's going to take some time to actually be able to transmit those signals back to the brain and actually be able to restore functional vision. So we would love to be able to see some sort of progress in terms of optic nerve structural and cellular healing. So the goal here is to demonstrate in at least 3 humans, whole eye transplantation surgeries, and that's per performer team, not total, and verify surgical success by demonstrating limited post-op inflammation, no infection, or systemic adverse events. And again, here are some potential paths forward, but we're not limited to that. And the metrics for TA phase 3, again, if we split it up into the 3 phases, 2 years each. Proof of concept, again, we start in large animal models. So we want to see a protocol for large animal surgery and verify surgical success by demonstrating no post-op inflammation or limited inflammation or infection, limited systemic adverse events, essentially by clinical exam. We want to demonstrate, we want to see at least 1 protocol for human microsurgery in cadavers, and demonstrate the absence of individual disfigurement, again, in both the harvest and the recipient transplant surgery. In phase 2, we're going to actually do the whole eye transplants with or without surrounding tissues in at least 15 large animals, utilizing at least 1 anti-inflammatory or anti-immune strategy to minimize post-op inflammation or rejection for at least 6 months. Verify donor globe viability for at least 6 months, again, within 90% of baseline, looking at OCT, MRI, things like that, and assess the overall health and recovery and function post-op. And then in phase 3, we're finally in humans. We want to meet and exceed the requirements of phase 1 and 2 in humans in at least 3 people. Donor and recipient transplant surgeries, again, must maintain individual appearances, no immune reaction or inflammation for at least 12 months. Verify the donor globe is still viable for 12 months. Visual recovery about 5% by Snellen acuity, and then assessments of overall health. So again, these are just guidelines. I refer you to the ISO, and we are very interested in hearing what you have to say in your proposals. So with that, I'll turn it back to Cal.
All right, thank you, Cynthia. All right, so, but when you really think about this, you know, what is it that we really want to do? And so when we think about each of these 3 TAs, and starting with TA1. So we really want to be able to maintain the viability of harvested eyes and keep them viable, and in a way that is not just for trial, but something that is a way that we're going to be able to do this on a large scale. and make eye transplantation something that's not just for a few particular medical centers, but is something that we can teach and we can learn throughout this country and hopefully internationally. When I think about TA2, about reconnecting the optic nerve, you can have your own way that you propose, but the way I would like to see it done is in an optic nerve transection model. So that you cut the optic nerve, you sew it back up, and you demonstrate the fact that you can now regenerate the signals to the brain. And then in TA3, understanding that there's more than just the optic nerve here. If we're really going to do this right, we want to reestablish sensation to the cornea. We want to get the parasympathetics innervation to the pupil through the short ciliary nerves. We want to get the sympathetic innervation to the pupil through the long ciliary nerves. And so it's not just the optic nerve. And I really want those of you who are thinking about TA3 to really figure out how you're going to reestablish the other innervations that are so important to the eye. Cynthia gave you a kind of an outline in terms of time, and I'm kind of taking all that information and putting it into this. And we have nominally looked at the 3 phases as each being about 2 years. Now, to some of this, you may say, oh my gosh, this is really aggressive. You want us to accomplish all this in 2 years. Other of you may say, no, I can move faster. I'm already there. Don't hold me back. And the answer is yes to both. So if you think that you can move faster, or you can move faster with one TA than the other, I don't want to put any limitations on you in terms of how fast you can move if you believe that you can move each of the technical areas from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3. The big gatekeeping occurs between phase 2 and phase 3. And that is when we sit down with each of you and you show us where you have gotten in terms of your animal models. And then we decide to go ahead with human work. So what's the ARPA-H approach? There's really 2 ways to go about this. As Amy said, we welcome academics, we welcome clinicians, we welcome industries. What we would prefer are fully integrated teams of performers. Those are teams that are capable of doing each of the technical areas, technical area 1, technical area 2, technical area 3. You are integrated, you're coordinated. That's what is our option. We understand, though, that there are certain of you with particular expertise in one area, and we do not want to dissuade that either. So that if you are an expert in TA1, in the harvesting and preservation, we will fund people who are just working in that area. Similarly, if you're an expert in TA2, in the optic nerve regeneration, and you just want to work on that part of it, we will take individual performers in TA1 and TA2. However, that is not our preference. Our preferences are fully integrated teams. So here's the timeline. Proposers' date today. By the 1st of March, we're looking for abstracts. The instructions for the abstract is in the ISO. So we want to see abstracts by the 1st of March. By the 20th of March, we will decide which of the abstracts we would like to ask for full proposals from. We want to see full proposals by April 15th. We'll make decisions early in the summer, at which point in time, we will then move the process to those within ARPA-H who are responsible for contracting. We want to be up and running come September. Finally, I want to take a bigger look at this. Short-term, long-term. What we're doing individually, how does this translate into something that improves health outcomes for all? So in the short term, we want to develop the necessary drugs and devices necessary to do this, along with technologies for nerve repair, and come up with ways to streamline this surgical procedure to make it something that's viable. But in the long run, what we want to do is improve organ procurement, work with the eye banks to make this something that can be done throughout the country. We want to engage with the community of people who are blind and visually impaired and make them part of what we're doing. And we want to be able to come up with a process that is translatable to a much larger community than just a few great academic institutions. So with that, let me turn it over to the process now. And Gina Perry is going to tell us about how this all works. Gina.
Thank you. So this portion of the presentation is not as exciting. So this is all contractual. So this is just going to be providing you with a brief overview on the contractual requirements and hopefully help you answer questions that you may have regarding the submission of the abstract and the full proposal. So at ARPA-H, we elected not to utilize the BAA or FAR Part 35. So a lot of the nomenclature or terminology that is typically associated with the BAA will be included within ISO. But the reason why we elected not to utilize the FAR is because we're looking for innovative solutions that are not restrictive. So some of the benefits of an ISO is that the ISO allows for merit-based awards. The ISO allows the government to focus awards decision on technical quality. So we're not looking at lowest price or lowest price technically acceptable. We're looking for the best ideas. And so the best ideas are going to supersede overall price. And the ISO allows for a variety of approaches to a problem. So we're not looking for only one solution. We're looking for multiple solutions. And the ISO also allows for flexibility with a variety of award instruments. Some of the basics of the ISO. So the award types is a little bit different from FAR-based procurements. We're going to allow you an opportunity to tell us which award type you want us to consider for your solution. Proposals will be given the opportunity to provide that information with the full proposal submission. The two award types that we are considering are the cooperative agreements and other transactions. And awards are going to be limited to 2 per awardee. So one is a prime and one is a sub-proposer. Award funding, once again, because we are not focusing on price, we're focusing on the idea and the solution that's being proposed. There is no funding limitation, there's no ceiling and no range. All reasonable proposals will be evaluated and considered. Awards are expected to be issued with negotiated milestones that are attached to the payments. So what we're looking with those milestones is that we're looking to see that progress has been made. And that's something that will be negotiated at the time of award. Award timeline. Full proposals are expected to be evaluated by July, and we anticipate beginning negotiations in July and awarding no later than mid-September. Once again, traditional awards are not going to be considered. So FAR-based procurements, along with grants, should not be proposed and will not be considered. So the 2 award times. The first one is the cooperative agreements. A cooperative agreement is considered a financial assistance vehicle. And the purpose of a financial assistance vehicle is to carry out a public purpose authorized by U.S. law. Cooperative agreements follow 2 CFR Part 200, 45 CFR 75, and it also follows the HHS federal regulations. With cooperative agreements, we're looking at substantial involvement between ARPA-H and the proposers that are selected for an award. So both parties are required to work together, and they are both responsible for achieving the agreed upon outcomes and the goals of the solution. The second type of award that we're considering with this ISO is the other transactions. So ARPA-H has the authority to award other transactions when the use of such authority is essential to promoting the success of the project. Other transactions are a form of a contract, however, they are not a FAR-based procurement contracts. Other transactions reflect commercial practices rather than traditional FAR procurement contracts. OTs are very similar to cooperative agreements that there will be substantial involvement, but it is considered a collaborative involvement. There's increased partnership leading to more effective use of resources and knowledge sharing. And there's an expectation that there will be a free flow of negotiations and communications throughout the life of the OT. So this chart right here provides you with a brief overview of some of the pros and the cons. So some of the pros of another transaction, as you're trying to determine which award type is the best one for your solution, is that many of the laws and regulations that typically apply to FAR-based procurements will not apply to OTs. For example, Competition and Contracting Act, the Bayh-Dole Act, the 45 CFR 75, the FAR, the HHS acquisition regulations, and the CAS accounting standards, including bid protest, is not applicable. OTs invoke commercial practices, and this is one that's typically very appealing to contractors that do not typically work with the government, because there is an opportunity for you to negotiate your terms and conditions with the governments. And it is also considered a more streamlined award process. Some of the cons is that because we are not following any set laws or regulations, it is negotiated terms and conditions. It does require a lot more finessing and negotiations. Cooperative agreements. Some of the pros to a cooperative agreement is that it is a standard process. It's one that's utilized within many agencies across the federal government, and it's very familiar to many folks. Some of the cons, though, is that you don't have that opportunity to be able to negotiate those terms and conditions because you are set by laws and regulations that prevent you from being able to negotiate some of those terms. The process overview, the abstract ISO submission requirements are identified on page 33 of the final ISO. And so the abstract is mandatory. It is one of the deciding factors if you will be invited to submit a full proposal. The abstract should cover criteria number 1 and 2, and this should be submitted via the ECPS website. The full proposal is covered under the final ISO under page 33, and the full proposal is by invitation only. If you do not receive an invitation, please do not submit a proposal. We will only review those that have been invited. Those that submit a request for an OT must submit them via ECPS, and those that submit a request for cooperative agreement must submit it via the grants.gov website. The summary of proposal and detailed proposal information should not exceed 30 pages. The evaluation and selection criteria is identified in the final ISO under page 36. The government will review each proposal based on the criteria outlined within the ISO. And so once again, it's criteria 1 and 2 for abstracts and criteria 1 through 4 for full proposal. So the evaluation criteria, the first one is the overall scientific and technical merits. Number 2 is the proposer's capability or related experience. And once again, this is for both the abstract and the full proposal. Evaluation criteria number 3 is the potential contribution and relevance to the ARPA-H mission. And this one's only applicable to the full proposal. And number 4 is reasonableness and realism and affordability. And this is only applicable to the full proposal as well. Some of the final guidance is that nothing stated during today's proposals day should be considered modifying the terms of the ISO. Anything that is modified should be an amendment and posted to SAM.gov and grants.gov. We request that you thoroughly read the ISO, pay close attention to the eligibility requirements that are on page 21 of the ISO. And ARPA-H does reserve the right not to review non-conforming proposals. Some of the reminders are that the SF 424 is required. The key personnel profile is also required. The R&R personal data is also required, and the project abstract summary is also required, and these are applicable to the cooperative agreements. Some of the key dates and deadlines to remember is that the abstracts are due March 1st, proposals are due April 15th. Any questions that you have may be submitted to the THEA inbox. And we just want to remind you that we do have a frequently asked questions site on our teaming profile that provides you with a list of questions that have previously been asked and been answered. We just do want to remind you not to include any proprietary information, any questions that you may submit to our inbox for us to consider. And we want to let you know if there's any differing information between the frequently asked questions and the ISO will supersede the frequently asked questions website. Next, I'll turn it over to Bill and he'll go over the cost proposal requirements.
Thank you, Gina. And Gina, I have to take a little bit of issue. I'm not sure why you think this is not the most exciting part of the day to talk about money. So thank you all. Good morning. It's a pleasure to have you. We are now back on time. My name is Bill Woodcock, and I am the business and financial manager for THEA. I've been with ARPA-H for about a year. So you saw Cal's timeline, and we are going to be doing a lot in a short amount of time, and we're asking for a lot of you in a short amount of time. And so just to kind of break out our internal process a little bit, you see what we're going to be doing for abstracts is we're going to be turning those around in literally a couple of weeks and letting everybody know, who has been invited to invite for proposals. On the proposals timeline, those items 1 through 7 will generally happen by around that July timeframe we were talking about. Negotiations will take a little bit longer. And so what I'm talking about today is kind of how to smooth this process and make it go quicker and to the advantage of your institution and your submission. So I'm not going to go over any of these long lists in very short and very small font. You can go over them at your leisure when the slides are posted. But cooperative agreements and other transactions, depending upon what sort of an agreement you might prefer, will require slightly different alterations in terms of the forms that are required. But Gina very ably went through in her presentation, what the most important items are. What I'd like to share, and then we can go on break, is a little bit of do's and don'ts and just some common reminders to make your cost proposals the best they can be, reduce the burden on myself and Gina to review the cost proposal, reduce the number of times we come back and bug you about, hey, we need this form, we need that form, and could you send us something updated? Again, make the process go smoother. Some of the most important things here that I'll just highlight in bullets. The per task cost broken down by fiscal year and phase, very important. You saw the timeline earlier today. We got a great, total cost. We need the total cost, obviously. So, don't just, many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the NIH budget process. We're asking for a little bit more detail, not just that breakdown by category and year, but also per task, per subtask, if you can do it, even per month. We'll ask for our proposals. Supporting documentation of any purchase over $5,000. That could be an item that's $6,000. It could be 100 items that cost $50 for the one item, and you need 100 of them. But anything over a $5,000 purchase, we need a cut sheet, a quote, something that justifies the expense. An itemization of all subcontracts, I think my big colleagues would agree with me. Document, document, document. If you have letters, if you have statements of work, if you have proposals from potential subcontracts, consultants, please include them. And make sure that you include in your cost proposal how those costs are realistic for and appropriate for the technical and management approach and what's in your SOW. Please don't utilize the checklist. Please don't change the formulas in the spreadsheet. Again, if anybody has done a DARPA proposal before, the Excel spreadsheet you'll get, it's very familiar. Please don't break it. And also, don't cost strategize. I cannot emphasize enough, ask for what you need. Don't think that if there's no low ball, high ball, ask for what you need to get the work done and be able to justify it. That is most important. And like I said, there's the cost proposal checklist. I'm not going to go sit here and talk about everything, but again, document, document, document. One of the things I should mention, because I know that NIH salary cap just went up, please use the 2024 cap in your figures. And then also a very important thing is, of course, since like with any other solicitation, most of the costs wind up being labor, we will ask for justification of your labor costs, some sort of documentation that people are earning the salaries that they're making on your proposal. And that's it. Not so bad. Well, thank you.
All right, so let's stretch and take a break for a couple minutes, but we want to keep on time, so we're going to start again in 13 minutes. Great, thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jenica Patterson. I'm one of the division leads in the transition office named PATIO, which is the Project Accelerator Transition and Innovation Office. I'm here to talk to you today a little bit about what we do in our transition office, how we work with our program managers, including Cal in his amazing THEA program, and how if you ended up getting funded by ARPA-H, how you would work with us. I was really excited to see the slide from Cal on the From Technology to Community, kind of THEA's future, because PATIO, our transition office, is really all along that pipeline from developing the technology, make sure that it's part that we're building it together to be able to transition out of ARPA-H to get into our community, to our people, and to the market across the United States. So just to give you a little background about the transition office and how it fits within the mission of ARPA-H. So remember, the mission of ARPA-H is to accelerate better health outcomes for everyone. And to be able to do that, we're going to have to make our technologies and our solutions we're funding to be able to connect to everyone in the United States. So what the mission is for our transition office is to make sure we increase that probability that the solutions that we're funding will reach those people. We want to identify the barriers to transition technologies early and often. So just a little background information, we've been working with Cal and his team from the beginning when he's been developing his program to make sure he's able to reduce those barriers to transition to be able to make the program successful and the solution he is creating successful. Since ARPA-H isn't going to fund performers in perpetuity, we want to make sure that our transition capabilities increase the odds that those solutions attract private investment as well as customers, people that want to use it, be it a patient, be it a doctor, to translate those breakthroughs to all Americans. Some people in the audience may be wondering, where would this solution go after ARPA-H? And I think Cal has a really great idea of where we could transition this solution, but think of it across a spectrum. It could go to another government agency. It could go to a large established company, to a healthcare system. We want to make sure when you're developing your proposals that you really think about where would your solution go once that ARPA-H funding finishes. And if you get funded by ARPA-H, you'll be working with our transition office to make sure that we identify those areas of transition for you. We understand, at least in the commercial sector, there's a lot of areas where commercial products fail. And we've done multiple analyses and due diligence to see what that looks like. A big part of this is we understand that many startups fail when they kind of reach that valley of death or don't realize that there's a market need. And we've been working with Cal's team closely to make sure that this program, there is a market need, and make sure when you're developing your proposals, you understand what that transition and commercialization need looks like. When we developed our transition office, we looked at it under design principles. So we used the IDEO framework to really build our entire office around that. So we look at three main areas. We look at feasibility. So that's really Cal and his team looking at, is this technology going to be feasible to get into the hands of all people? There's also two big pieces of that. That's viability and desirability. Viability, we want to make sure that we're developing solutions that the commercial market would be enthusiastically adopting. And we want to make sure that the solutions we're creating are desirable, that people across America will want to enthusiastically adopt our our solutions. And in the intersection of that is really where the innovation happens. So within the transition office, we have developed that, we have taken that IDEO framework and developed 3 divisions to make this a reality. So we have the Technology Transfer and Transition division, that is my division, where we are helping build transition-ready programs. We're de-risking solutions. We are helping design the program. So we have those barriers reduced for transition along the program pipeline. We have our HEAT division, which is our Health Ecosystem Engagements team led by Dan Bram. We want to make sure we're creating meaningful bi-directional communication between ARPA-H and all of America. So Dan Bram is helping us with that with his incredible team. And then last, we have the ARPA-Net for Health. You might have heard some buzz on it. If you go through to our website, you'll hear about our 2 amazing hubs that are across the United States. This is making sure that we're connecting a fragmented health ecosystem through projects, R&D projects, through events, and really democratizing that learning across our agency and across America. And that's led by Amy Lynn. In our transition leads, our office director is Craig Gravitz, and our deputy director is Melissa Antman. So I'm going to quickly go through what we do in each of our divisions and how you could potentially work with us as you go through your process in the THEA program, as well as other opportunities to work with us at ARPA-H. So with the Health Ecosystem and Engagement team, again, we are trying to create meaningful bi-directional communication between ARPA-H and America. We create ecosystem activities, speaking opportunities for our leaders within ARPA-H. That includes our director, the mission office directors, as well as the program managers like Cal. We have a network on demand that we've been creating. Really, this is a self-service platform for ARPA-H program managers, as well as others across our agency, to access key external stakeholders and ensure deduplication of efforts. That's going to be really important as we move through these programs to make sure we're connecting with those right people when we're moving Cal from technology to community, that we're connecting him with those key stakeholders, as well as understanding that we're not reinventing the wheel. We also are building design services within our engagement team and also doing things called immersive experiences. We bring our program managers into hospitals, into areas of need to make sure they are designing solutions that are important to people. The next is our ARPA-Net for Health. So just to give you some quick background about our ARPA-Net for Health, Congress mandated that ARPA-H has 3 sites, physical locations across the country. So our director, Renee, as well as our transition director, Craig, said, okay, Congress, we will give you those 3 sites and we're going to level up to meet the entire country. So we have 1 operations hub in DC, and then we solicited out to 2 sites across the country. 1 to bring those IDEO frameworks, to bring that IDEO framework into reality. So we have 1 hub that is located in Dallas, Texas. That is our customer experience hub. So we want to make sure that we are designing solutions that people want to enthusiastically adopt. That is what is going to be happening in our customer experience hub in Dallas, Texas, and they are connecting with spokes across the country to make sure we're bringing in capabilities that's going to serve our program and our program managers. We also have an investor catalyst hub. So that's located in Boston, in Massachusetts, and that's bringing in the desirability piece. We want the viability piece, excuse me. We want to make sure that we are developing solutions that the market wants to enthusiastically adopt. And we have spokes across the country that also are bringing in those enabling capabilities for ARPA-H. Some of you in the room right now might be a spoke. If you're not, that is one way to actually be part of our community at ARPA-H. If you go to our website at ARPA-H and look up ARPA.net for health, you can become a spoke. You can become part of our network. This is an opportunity for us to bring in enabling capabilities for our program managers and their performer teams as programs get active to make sure that we are making transition successful to people and to the commercial sector. We do things like funding opportunities. We are creating network activations, so gathering feedback at scale to make sure that we are reaching a network of members and creating things that people want to desire. We also do what we call program augmentation for the future. So that is really making sure that as our ARPA-H projects mature, that we're bringing those enabling capabilities to our program teams to make them successful. And last but not least is my division. That's the Technology Transfer and Transition Service Division. And we really are building helping build transition-ready programs. We're de-risking solutions from program design all the way to performance. Like I told you, we were working with Cal's team really closely as they were building THEA, and we're going to continue to work with Cal's team as he launches his program and picks his performer teams. We have what is called an expert in residence program. We make sure that we are bringing experts from the commercial sector to the table to understand what are those barriers to transition and how can our program managers reduce those barriers to transition for our performer teams to make them successful. As we move on to award, we want to make sure that we are providing the right support for our performer teams and our PMs to lower barriers. For example, we can bring in bespoke regulatory experts and reimbursement experts to our teams to make sure that they are getting the right access to move seamlessly across their regulatory pipeline. For example, I saw there was you have to get a 510K at the end of this program. We can bring those expert ins to help support that if you do not have that on your performer team. We also do landscape analyses. We know that across time that market is going to change. And we want to make sure that we're staying on top of it at ARPA-H. We understand what's happening. And we're going to be working closely with Cal's team to make sure we understand what those dynamics look like over the next couple of years. And lastly, another way outside of this program to work with ARPA-H is our small business program. We have one. It's a congressionally mandated program. You can go look at the ARPA-H website. We actually have an active solicitation right now. So another way to work with ARPA-H. This is program manager led. So one day Cal may have a topic in there that's related to his program or another program that he wants to launch. So stay tuned there. So that is all the slides I have, but I just want to leave this with you that just understand at ARPA-H and within our transition office, we really do mean what we say when we want to make sure our solutions get into the hands of people. We will be working closely with Cal will be working closely with the teams that he chooses to make sure that you're successful and that we can get these solutions out to the hands of all people. I'll stop there. Thank you for your time.
Awesome. So we're going to have some frequently asked questions now. I am just going to go through pretty quickly some of the general questions that have come through for many ARPA-H programs, questions that you guys have come to us with over the last couple of months. And then I'm going to ask my colleagues to come up here and then you can grill them about anything that you might still have on your mind. Okay. Great. So with respect to teaming, a lot of people have asked us, can a single group be a part of multiple proposals? Can one person be a part of multiple proposals? And so the directive from lovely Gina here is that yes, you may submit and be awarded 2 proposals, one as the prime and one as sub-proposer, or 2 as sub-proposer. And the limiting factor here is really how much research and development you're going to be proposing. You can only have 2 proposals that have development in them. And then more than that, if you were just providing an agent or a device without any development. So can you partner with people from industry, academia? Do you have to partner with a specific institution type? No, you're able to team up with whoever you want. And we love to see teams that have mixed participation, mixed institutions. Is there a limit to how many institutions you can have for your team? No, but we do want to see detailed budget information from each institution, which is all detailed in the ISO. And then please include in your proposal what that program management structure is going to look like and who's going to be your prime and how that coordination is going to happen. Can you have multiple PIs? There can only be one main PI and everybody else will be a co-PI or co-investigator. And then changing teams partway through the program is allowed, but those are mostly rare occasions. And so we do ask that you reach out to us. We will work with you and we'll figure out on a case-by-case basis how to meet your needs. Will we be establishing teams for you guys? I'm looking for a partner to complement our capabilities. We love to see diverse and capable teams. We will not make the introductions for you. That's why all of you are here. But we do ask that you get a chance to talk to everybody, go to our teaming website, read through all of the teaming profiles, and reach out to each other. This is very much a social game. And so we hope that you all get a chance to discuss today. Okay, metrics. So Cynthia talked about the metrics, Cal talked about the metrics. We do know that the timeline is aggressive. We're asking you guys to complete some of these phases in 2 years. Is that possible? Do we really intend for you to hit these metrics? The short answer is yes. We want you to work hard to be able to meet those metrics. ARPA-H in itself, this is the ARPA way. We try to set our goals really, really high. One of those reach for the moon, you might land among the stars type idea. But we also have we all have been in a scientific field at one point, and we understand that advancements come with failures along the way. And so that's all part of the process. What happens if I don't meet the metrics at one point in my project? Are you going to stop my project? So we have these 3 phases that Cal talked to us about. And not in all situations will a performer be able to move from phase 1 to 2 or 2 to 3, but those metrics that we listed are not necessarily very rigid go or no-go criteria. They have been put in place to help us make decisions about whether we see sufficient progress, and ultimately we'll decide who moves on to the next phase based on the state of the technical program and how much progress has really been made. Okay, we have an advanced prototype. Can we go faster than the milestones you've scheduled? Cal talked about this. We love to see people move faster than the timeline that we've provided. We don't want to hold you back. We would love to see things happen quicker. If you can move faster in one TA versus another, all is fair game. Do we have any preferred technology approaches for THEA? We'll entertain all the approaches that you propose for us as long as they fit within those metrics and the TA guidelines that we've given you. And again, refer to the ISO for those. What if we want to use metrics that are not mentioned in the ISO? we've established a lot of these metrics by talking to you guys. And so this is definitely going to be a cyclic process. If there's anything that we've missed, come talk to us, and we're happy to amend the ISO. We're happy to talk about what other approaches could look like. And so you are, you're our brain trust, right? Everybody in here knows what those metrics should really look like and how we can kind of extend the boundaries of that. So come and talk to us about it. Meetings and technical, can you meet with us to discuss your idea? As much as we love meeting with you guys, and we're always happy to meet with you to answer questions, we're actually not able to discuss any of the concepts that you plan to submit to the ISO. Can we tell you if we like your technical approach? We're not very good at keeping straight faces, but we will evaluate and provide feedback on your technical concepts only once they've been officially submitted. What if I have an idea that's outside of the scope of THEA? ARPA-H also does have an open broad agency announcement called the Open BAA, which is more of a general call to proposal, which you can also consider. So just check out the website for that. International proposers or foreign entities eligible for award. They are non-US entities may participate and seek for funding through ARPA-H. Though we will prioritize awards to domestic entities that are going to be conducting funded work in the US. So we do encourage that international proposers collaborate with domestic US entities where possible, and that you may be subject to clearance review prior to being able to work on an award, either as a prime or a sub. Okay, federal entities and federally sponsored entities, such as national labs, federally funded research and development centers, university affiliated research centers are not eligible for awards under this announcement, but ARPA-H is doing a really great job of seeking out our federal partners and figuring out ways that we can work together to our overall goals. So reach out to us to discuss that if you fall under this category. Okay, abstract submission. Gina talked about this. We will be providing feedback on responsive abstracts. So things, any abstracts that are submitted that actually fit under the requirements that we've given. You will get feedback on evaluation criteria 1 that Gina talked about, which is overall scientific and technical merit. And then you will receive 1 of 3 decisions. Either you will not be selected to move forward, or your abstract will then, we will reach out to request the submission of a full proposal, or 3 that will ask you to provide further explanation for anything that was unclear. Again, abstracts are due March 1st, and then we'll be providing you with that feedback in the coming weeks after that. Full proposal. May I submit a full proposal if my abstract is not selected? Can I submit a full proposal if I do not submit an abstract? In the case of this program, we will not be accepting any full proposals from proposers who submit an abstract but are not selected or not invited. So you must submit an abstract in order to submit the proposal if you're invited to do so. And we'll feedback we provided on all full proposals. We will be providing feedback according to selection criteria on the ISO. Full proposals are due on the 15th, and then give us some time to go through those. We have to do our due diligence, and so it does take a couple of months for us to make sure that we've reviewed them to the technical depth that they require, and that federal entities are able to review them as well. Okay. Why don't I think at this point I'll ask our team to join us on stage. Anybody who wants to answer questions can come up and sit with us. Oh, I got the mic. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to start by posing the budget question to our budget whiz over here, Bill.
All right.
So I can pose it to you. You can sit and talk with me.
Okay, I think that there's some problems that people are having online on seeing the slides. So let me read it. Then we expound a little bit more in our answer. So the question is, how big can our program be? What's the overall budget for THEA? So proposers are encouraged to propose a realistic, justifiable, reasonable, comprehensive budget that aligns with the solution, as talked about earlier. The proposed budget should align with the technical scope. There's been no ceiling established. We cannot provide details, just as stewards of government dollars, taxpayer dollars for THEA or for a budget number for your budget. But also, like I said during my earlier talk, we discourage strategies like only using junior staff or proposing low-risk ideas. So again, that thing I said, ask for what you need. And then the rules around the salary cap in the cost proposal mentioned earlier also, the HHS salary cap. So since 1990, it has been in statute, the salary cap for HHS, and effective January 1, 2024, the salary cap, as I'm sure many of you know, is $221,900. This means that the maximum for any person in 1 year, the maximum that you can ask for one individual salary is $221,900. So, I know your institutions have rules where you index that against your percent effort and all that. I leave you to your home institutions to work with that, but the highest dollar figure you can ask for in a year is $221,900. And so the next questions are about IP.
Gina, you can answer this question.
Mm-hmm.
About who will own the IP.
That is a good question. So it is, the IP will be negotiated, but I don't believe that the government intends on owning the rights. Is that correct, Ryan?
Yes.
We do.
Yes.
Yes, we do not intend on owning the rights.
Right, and ARPA-H just wants to make sure that IP is not going to prevent, breakthrough technologies from coming to fruition. Okay, and then so this is a little bit THEA specific. We've had the question of why can we not propose to TA3 alone, and why are TA3 groups required to team up in order to propose? And so our thought process is basically that TA3 can't be a standalone technical area, since all the surgical protocols that are developed would be directly informed by the innovations that come out of TA1 and TA2. And so the aim is really for TA3 proposers to find TA1 and TA2 folks to be able to prioritize that goal of the restoration of vision. Okay, and so let's open up a live Q&A. So if anybody has a question, I'm hoping that mic is working, and you can come up and ask a question if there are any. If not, we can take a really long lunch.
So you just wanted to remind them that Shannon provided for.
Yeah, and just a reminder for anybody that's coming up to ask a question, you are in a group of the public. And so any of the technical details about your proposal that you don't want to be shared publicly, just keep that in mind when you ask your questions. If you have any questions that you cannot ask here, please come to us at the sidebar meetings to ask us that personally, send us an email, or schedule a virtual sidebar with us.
I think I'm getting a little bit of feedback here, so I apologize if it screeches. I had a little bit of question of some of the eligibility requirements that you went over. This thing that maybe deviate from the open BAA language as far as federal entities being able to be performers. Is that instead for this? Is that true? Read that correctly?
That is correct. So that has changed. The requirement does now allow you as a federal entity to propose under the THEA ISO.
So, okay, so somebody from the NIH wanted to apply, they can.
Yes, they can.
Okay, great. And also, what about foreign-based companies? Are they also allowed to apply?
They are, but they would have to partner with a US entity.
Okay, so US entity needs to be the prime and not a
Yes.
opponent. Okay, all right, thank you.
I think the other parties could under the BAA, but not under.
No, they can't.
Right.
With the new policy from Kathy.
Okay, thank you.
This is actually a question for Bill. Are you looking for more detailed BOEs for cost estimates, or what level? Because it sounded like you're trying to do a hybrid kind of approach.
Okay, so I love the term BOE. Worked in the contracting world before. So let me answer more of the question than you asked. For the abstract portion, basically what we need is one, just a rough order of magnitude estimate. The proposal submission in the spreadsheet is it's much more than a BOE, but the documentation, you could think of it as a BOE. So again, you would have your elements of expense, your direct labor, your materials, supplies, equipment, travel costs. And then that would be in your spreadsheet, and then the negative to your cost proposal is when you would have essentially what in NIH world they call the budget justification, except it's a lot more detail. It's all of that backup that justifies your salaries, your cut sheets on your materials, travel costs, please use government per diems and reasonable airfares and so forth. Does that address? Cool. Thank you. All right. Anyone else?
Oh. Thanks. I'll ask one on the 1.1 prime. Is that per institution or per PI, like let's say professors at academic institutions?
Per institution.
Oh, right up there. Oh, in front. And then in the back.
Right.
On the regulatory process, I see in phase 2, you're asking for IDE submission and large animal studies, but usually large animal studies inform the IDE submission. That is, those results need to go into the IDE submission. So technically, the IDE submission should come at the beginning of phase 3. And then similarly for the pre-submission, it would be more useful for the FDA to know a device that's close to the design freeze so that they can provide useful feedback to the investigators about the tests and that are required. So potentially, perhaps the pre-submission needs to be at the beginning of phase 2, and the IDE submission would be at the beginning of phase 3. I wonder if you would be flexible in terms of those timelines, or at least the pre-submission at the end of phase 1.
Cynthia.
Sure, I can address that. So yes, and so that I can see that you're going to be submitting. You say the beginning of phase 3. I think really at the end of phase 2, after the technology has been evaluated. So yeah, semantics. Yes.
Thank you. Our team is regularly involved in the actual patient's early phase stuff, but it's very similar to these experiments. And I just want to make sure that there's something that's implicit and not implied. Whenever you do something to an optic nerve, depending if you do it anterior to where the chiasm crosses in the knee of von Willebrand, at the chiasm posterior, you're going to get contralateral vision defects. You're always going to hurt the other eye. It's going to be either something like bow tie atrophy. You're going to have a spur visual field defect. So I just want to make sure that we understand that whenever we're going to go after this nerve, that patient who's going to do, and I've operated on these patients, we do it all the time, that nerve you get is going to cause a superior visual field defect in the other eye. So that's really important in a monocular patient, just to be aware that, that's what we're going to be doing whenever we approach that. And that's a tricky part.
Right. And certainly from the very start, the patients we're going to be operating are people without vision in either eye. Correct.
Okay. Anyone else?
I have a question on that FDA process, Cal. Again, there's going to be lots of partners in there, some of them coming in with more mature technologies or devices or whatever, with a certain history of regulatory, success or experience, and others may not have that. So how do you have these folks predict those costs or costs? Include those costs into this project, like into this proposal. And what would happen if the FDA, let's say this device or technology is successful enough in a particular phase, but the FDA comes back with further requests for extra work or other information? How does that factor into the ARPA process?
Great.
Thank you.
Good. I would defer that to Jenica And if Jenica can answer that question.
I'm not sure if Jenica's still online.
Tyler, you want to, go ahead.
So we recognize, we did this many times in programs at DARPA, and we're starting that at ARPA-H, that you may get into your work and find out that the FDA wants something else, and it may not be in your statement of work. One thing you heard from Gina during her conversation or her presentation is that we will work, there will be an iterative process between the government and the performer teams on those statements of work. And they will change over the course of the time that you're performing this work. What you set out to do at the very beginning of year one, things will fail. You will have to take a new approach. There will have to be changes made. And so there'll be modifications to that statement of work. If the FDA were to come back in year 3 and say, we need you to do these additional works, then that would be a conversation between you and Cal and the contracting officers to discuss how you incorporate those changes into the statement of work. But ARPA-H certainly recognizes that the FDA will trump this situation. And so if the FDA says you've got to do something and it's not in the statement of work, then we would modify the statement of work.
Okay. Another question.
My questions pertains to the regulatory sort of hurdles that sometimes we face with federal funding for IRBs for both, not IRBs, but IACUC and other federal regulatory animal proposals that double sort of and additionally IRB and ARPA. So is there, because the timeline's so fast, that there are going to be some ways we can streamline that or even do, IRBs across centers, for example, and take out some of the extra delays that we face sometimes with that?
Yeah, I might turn this over to Tyler because he's got a little bit more experience in HHS. You were using a lot of DoD terms there. So one thing I will say is that within Health and Human Services, we do not have a HARPO, so a Human Research Protection Officer. We don't have that requirement within HHS. Same for the animal use. So there's no ACURO if you're familiar with that. But there are other HHS regulations, and Tyler has much more experience on that. So I'll let him jump in there.
What Amy said, we don't have the HARPO, the ACURO, et cetera. HHS typically is open to what the NIH policy is on that, and the multi-institute IRB can accommodate all of that. I do know that can cause delays as well. And so you want to strategize and justify your approach if you do a single IRB and the challenges that come with that, or multiple IRBs and the consequences, challenges that come with that. We're open to either aspect, but justify it and make a sound rationale for what's going to be best for what you're doing.
And I will add that we do have folks on staff, federal employees at ARPA-H that are experts in both the clinical trials and the human subjects research and the animal research that help teams that are performing at the agency.
Okay, I see at least 10 more questions. So
Thanks. Actually, 2 questions. Thanks for the day. It's been very educational. One is, as you can imagine, for most of us, as you said, this is a very new process. So I'm wondering, is it possible, since there have been several other ARPA-H grants already, is there any information either that's publicly available about the other projects, either budgets or some of the applications, or is there anything we can learn from the applications that have already been submitted? Because I think that I understand you might not be able to, but if you can, it would be very helpful for us in preparing our applications.
So what we can't do is share proposals from other entities. Those are proprietary and confidential. But if you look on our website, we do have a whole section of our website that lists the projects that we have funded from our open broad agency announcement. And so there you can see an understanding of the scope of those types of efforts. And generally they do list the rough order of the contract ceiling, the amount that was awarded to those. And we've awarded a lot, maybe 15. So there's a lot of examples on our website to look at.
So some of the finances is available, you said?
Yes, the total dollar value of the contract that was awarded is listed.
And how does Freedom of Information Act, like with NIH, how does that apply to these grants? Is it the same as with NIH or?
Go ahead. So Ryan is our branch head for R&D, so he may have a better answer for you on this.
It applies. So it's under the same general structure.
Okay.
And the second question is, you mentioned that you don't have study section, but can you tell us a little bit more about the review process? Is it all determined internally by you guys, or do you get expert opinions from other people? Because obviously you're going to get a tremendous diversity of grants. I just wonder where all the expertise is going to be able to review what's coming in and how you're going to handle the review process.
Yes, of course. That's a great question. You want to? So for the program manager, Cal will review all of the proposals that come in. He'll read all of them and evaluate them. We ask for 2 additional government reviewers. So we don't use external reviewers, but there will be a minimum of 3 government reviewers, a minimum. Sometimes we ask for more, depending on expertise of the folks that we are able to have review for us. Those government employees provide those technical, those evaluations on those evaluation criteria as listed in the ISO. But then the final decision rests with Cal. And so that's where we don't do things by consensus. So he will take the advice and the evaluation of those government reviewers, but he will make the final decision. And then he will present that decision to me as the scientific review official. And I will either agree with his decision or disagree with his decision, but it's a very streamlined process.
Okay, so 2 questions from folks over here.
Thank you. I have a question similar to what was asked about FDA. Another big part of it would be in-licensing of technologies, because a lot of these technologies that would be interdependent. And at this moment, something that we develop would rely on other technologies, or it be owned by different institutions. And it's really hard at this moment to project how much would it cost to go into a licensing agreement with them. So would it be, at this moment, should it be open-ended? Would there be an opportunity to get that extra support later? And how do we write it up?
I don't think Bill ever wants to see an open-ended budget. I would say.
Mine would be blown. We need a number. Again, I think it's obviously much more important that, cost is always a consideration in a review process, right? But really, it's the science. So if the science is awesome, do your best where costs may not be defined again in the short time frame that we're working in. But also rest assured, and I can speak to my experience at ARPA-H of this, is that we will come back to you and say, you're asking for a lot here. What can we do? So, the thing that's unique about our contracts is, we can, and again, Amy spoke very well about our process, but, there might be tasks where, we'll go, we'll do line item. Is this something that's necessary? Is this, can you get to the same end by taking a different pathway? And so, of course, that certainly, affects the resources, the time and money you would need to work on it. So my quick answer is, ask for what you want, ask for what you need, be able to justify it, but also, we reserve the right to move that around. Go ahead.
I just have a quick question not related to science. Will the questions that we discussed right now be updated on the FAQ section of the site, so the collaborators can access them?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
If the questions were discussed in the video, would show at FAQ section of the video program.
Yeah, absolutely. And this session is going to be recorded and I think posted online, so you should be able to access this as well.
Okay.
But remember, everything that But remember, everything that we say here is what we're saying here. The ISO trumps supersedes anything that we say here or anything that's posted in the FAQ.
So I have a series of questions, but I want to start off with something broader. And I'm super excited to be here because you all are the first real live people from ARPA-H that I have been able to speak to, and you speak back. This agency is very much a black box, as far as I can tell, unless one has the good fortune to be physically in the same room with somebody from ARPA-H at the same time. So along those lines, do you have a sense of long-term, is all of the funding going to be program specific, or will there always be some amount of funding in the open call? And as a follow-up on that, will there be a mechanism for potential proposers to an open call to get some kind of input and feedback beyond the abstract process, which is, again, very, very closed. Rhonda has these associated calls that you can set up. Okay, you know what I'm talking about. So, is open going to go away as the agency ramped up? Can you give us some sense of the availability of open for, super aggressive, high risk stuff that we might want to propose that doesn't slot into something? So that's question one.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, I hope that we're not too much of a black box. A lot of what you're seeing right now is just bandwidth. We're a very small new agency. And so, when we are at steady state, we very much anticipate, program managers will just have phone calls with folks. It is a bandwidth issue right now. So bear with us. So as far as your other question, so the bulk of our funding moving forward, when we are we're a toddler agency right now, and we're a full grown kid agency, the bulk of our funding will be through our programs. But what we never want to do is miss a good idea just because there's not a program around it. And so we do always anticipate having an open call for proposals to get those other ideas. As the agency grows and more of our funding is focused on those programs, the percentage of funding that will come out of that open BAA will be much smaller, and the awards will be typically will start to shrink a little bit too, because we're going to be looking for just the things that are filling out the edges. As a full-fledged agency, we'll have hundreds of programs, and so then filling in the gaps will be more what we'll be looking for in that open broad agency announcement.
Okay, so thank you for that. That's good to know. We can look forward to that. So the other question I have is if you can give us a sense of kind of how you're thinking about building your risk portfolio. So obviously you could take everything that has a 0.02 chance of success, where people are being super aggressive, and that might be great for getting a bunch of sort of low-hanging fruit in all those directions, but getting nothing across the finish line. How are you considering risk across the whole program? So for example, if we have something that we want to propose that we feel like is maybe a 6 on the risk scale instead of a 9, can we have some level of confidence that it won't be completely discarded? Or, what can you say about risk integrated over the whole program?
Good. So, we're looking for those creative solutions. And the one thing that I will say is that as part of a program like this, and all programs at ARPA-H, we expect the efforts to be very risky. Where we buy down risk is by having multiple approaches. So one potential approach may be to put the really crazy idea out there that has, if successful, maybe it's going to be the better solution. But there's ways to have maybe less risky approaches. And so we do take multiple approaches. We don't just fund crazy science fiction. The way we buy down risk is by taking multiple shots on goal at achieving those metrics.
Okay, so the schedule until 11:45, so I want to keep that in mind, but we have another question here in the back.
This is a very basic message follow question, and maybe it was answered earlier, but does the work, can we also publish this work in a journal, like as far as comes? That's my question number 1. And question number 2 is, let's say proposal gets accepted, do we also get the t-shirts? Issue guys are
Do you want to talk about the publications?
Yes, so publication is something that would be allowed, but there would be an approval process internally that would be negotiated within your terms and conditions.
I spent many years in this world, and I would say that I know a lot of academic teams get very nervous when we say there's publication restrictions. Really, we have never and never would edit your science. It is more assuring that you've acknowledged where the funding came from and that you're not disclosing something that's just inappropriate for the agency. But we're not going to change, graphs and that type of thing. That's not what we're here to do in those reviews.
Oh, the t-shirts.
Oh, yeah. If you want a t-shirt, you have to join us.
Can you just comment on your expectation in these proposals for covering phase 1, phase 1 and 2, phase 1, 2 and 3? You mentioned briefly that there will probably be like that moment of consideration really between 2 and 3 when it's time to go to humans. But are you looking for incorporation of phase 3 already in these initial applications?
let alone phases 1 and 2.
And so the answer is very much yes, because of the fact that we want our teams to be ready for phase 3 when it's time for phase 3, that they have done the preliminary cadaver work, feasibility, and has already done this surgery in large animals, so that they feel so confident that when we say go for humans, that they're ready to go. So the answer is yes.
Oh, follow up.
Sorry. Just to clarify, my impression from the document is that phase 3 includes actual work in living humans. Am I misreading that?
So phase 3, I'm sorry, so
No,
phase
phase 3. I'm not talking about phase 3, I'm talking about phase 3. The phase 3 years
is all in living humans.
Yes, and you want to see that included in, that can be included in these rounds.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Behind you.
All right. So there's a few questions. So 1, 2, 3.
This is a bit of a naive question, but let's say you're a part of a team that only gets through phase 2 and doesn't move on to phase 3. Does all the data that they achieved at that time that they were sharing with the THEA management team, does that get distributed among the teams that did move on?
No, that information will not be shared.
This is Yana, and I have an interesting question, I hope. So a few of us here are doing technology development, and we all know that research is not a linear process. So let's say we're developing technologies for small animals, move them into large animals, and suddenly realize that the teams we work with need much more material than we actually bargained for. But when it comes to the budget that we proposed initially, so will there be any options or any opportunities to make an adjustment in SOW and the budget to actually serve our partners better? Because that is their concern. You might make, so many kilograms or something, but you need 20. I'm talking about basic things. I lived in this world for quite some time, and 10 rats spend so much, but then 10 pigs might end up being much more than rats. That's my question.
Yes.
Yes, you'll have an opportunity based on progress and modification to the statement of work to account for any additional upward costs.
Okay, so another question here. Is there anybody else who has a question? Because I know we're starting to get time short. Okay, feel free to still ask, but.
So this is actually more of a suggestion than a question, but it's both. And I realize you can't do it short term, but I just want to throw it out there for the future. I think your funding approach sounds great, that you really want to look at the science, what's going to affect the field, what's going to be impactful, et cetera, and then worry about the money. So if that's the case, which it is from what you've said, how about having proposals come in science without a budget initially and really evaluate the science, see which projects you want to fund, and then work with the team that proposed it to negotiate a budget that is reasonable for all parties involved, to sort of separate going through, because it's actually a lot of work and hard to come up with a budget for all this kind of new stuff. And since it's a science and the impact that you're judging it by, maybe separate it into 2 different phases.
I mean, that's a great question, but I think one thing you have to consider is that there's a lot of cost that goes into preparing a full proposal, right? So we need to make sure that it's something that we are able to fund in the future. So we don't want you to do unnecessary work on a solution or proposal that we may not consider funding because it's so being proposed at such a high dollar amount. And I've actually never seen where a proposal is submitted without a budget. And I'm not sure that that's something we would consider.
Okay, any other questions? Oh, so I'm not sure if we can click through it, but if you go to the THEA program page, the page, which I'm sure many of you have, and maybe smart on that. Show you my. Should I share it?
Maybe, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna go to THEA's webpage.
So we.
ARPA-H.gov.
All right, so folks, the way to go to the announcement or the ISO is to go to the ARPA-H website, go to programs, find the FEMA page listed under the programs. And then what you'll see when you go to the THEA page will be a link that says THEA special notice. You want to click on that link for THEA special notice. And then you will want to scroll down on that page that's in STEM.gov. And actually, let me go through this on screen since we have it again. Oh, okay. So you want to find the latest version of the special notice, which is revised January 17th. And so you'll click on that special notice, revised January, updated, revised or updated, and probably says updated. January 17th, 2024. And then when you get to that page, it will say, you'll get a page that says THEA ISO. So again, and let me be a little bit more specific. When you go to that special notice, again, you're on ARPA-H, the THEA page, you click on THEA special notice, you will scroll down to where it says history. And then you'll go January 17th, 2024, click on the link that says special notice updated. And then if you are on that page, you'll go down to attachments and links at the very bottom. And then you will see 75 and 992240002, the ISO draft. And that is the place. And I also put it in the chat for those who are remote, and happy to show that to anybody who needs further guidance.
So we're still working through the final ISO and we're hoping to have that published by the end of this week, hopefully. No, we're not expecting major changes. Yes, the dates will not change.
Okay, great. So I decided to take notes to what were the key points that came out of the discussion and what's important to us at ARPA-H and what I think should be important to you. So I made some notes. Number one is the importance of this afternoon. We think this afternoon is critical. This is the opportunity for you to learn from each other and figure out how you can put together the best team to accomplish what you want to accomplish in this program. So this afternoon is going to be great and we're looking forward to it. Second, the importance of teams. And so this is a little bit of a new concept, at least for me, coming from academia at Cornell, you all the same way, that we're kind of used to doing things within our lab, we're used to doing things within our institution. This is a really a situation where if we're going to be successful, it's going to be multiple institutions working together and figuring out how in the world you're going to do that. Number three, this is about contracts versus grants. Almost all of us have lived our academic lives getting grants. This is so different because what we're trying to do is work to the goal. This is more similar to what I experienced in my years when I was in industry, where you start with the goal and you work back to how we're getting to how we're going to get there. How we're going to start with what science is out there and now how we're going to use that science to get us to our goal, more than at least my experience in the grad world, where we're starting with a problem and we're trying to gain knowledge. So, so this is different, and I want you to be successful in this. Number four, one of the things that really attracted me to ARPA-H is the idea that this is new money. This is not money that otherwise would have gone to National Eye Institute or gone to another funding source. And so what we're doing here is we're bringing new money to vision science, and we're just expanding our whole field. And that's what really excites me, actually, about ARPA-H. And then the final thing, and I hope this message has really come across to you. If we fail, we'll fail only on the science. If we succeed, we'll succeed on the science. And so that what I really want you to all be thinking about is the science, and the science. We'll see you all this afternoon. Thank you.